Portion.
Welcome to the Three Bros Pod, where sometimes I let these idiots ramble before I have my introduction because I can't shut them up.
Are you telling me that there's been 10 minutes of just incoherent nonsense? Is that what you're saying?
3 different questions this week while I ignore Chad.
Sure.
So I posted articles on each one for context. But once again, this is the Three Bros Pod where we read things and without knowing what we're talking about, criticize them. So
it feels right.
It does feel right. So we talked a little bit about taxes last week, and Caleb mentioned just a flat tax in general. I don't remember the specifics, but just a flat tax in general. So it got me thinking, just like everybody, what tax system... I said what tax system is the most fair to you, but really, honestly, it's whatever thoughts you have on a tax system. Like, what do you feel comfortable with? And... My money is always on it's just kind of on what we have now. Like I don't see any issue with dollars being taxed at the same amount on a ladder as you move up, right? So those first dollars for any person, regardless if you make $1 billion or $20,000 a year, the first dollars are crucial to like living in basic needs, right? Like every human being is always going to try to cover their needs first. And those first dollars that come in, regardless of who you are always going to go towards that. But any extra is kind of a luxury, right? Like anything more than your basic needs is a luxury in a way. Obviously, your token lefty isn't talking about communism. Let's just get that out of the way. But no, as you move up the ladder, you get taxed more. I feel like that makes sense. That's the system we have. And I think that as far as the word fair goes, that's probably the most fair to me. It evenly taxes everyone for every dollar they make, no matter, regardless of what bracket it comes in, right? So there's a sense of fairness for letting those that are most disadvantaged in society to not have to be, especially if you make the rate 0 below like a poverty line, say, it makes those disadvantaged not have to pay as much, but also that person who's rich doesn't pay as much either on those first whatever thousands of dollars below a poverty line. And I think that just like it makes sense because I'm sure everybody would agree with the fact that money in some way is power in any society, especially in ours. So letting every single dollar be taxed at the same percentage, I just feel like that does a disadvantage to especially what this country was founded on, as far as like, hey, as long as you work hard, you'll be able to climb out. But if starting out, you're going to be taxed the same as later on, especially when you need to cover basic needs, I just feel like that doesn't really do much for the client, like the idea that, hey, if you work hard, you can climb out. Like it doesn't, you know what I'm saying? It meshes really well with that because people who are at the bottom, well, at least in my abstract mind right now.
Sure.
Hang on, really quick. Let me finish up really quick.
Yeah.
So that's basically when I first wrote this question, what I thought about it. Just like it's not necessarily off the first thought, even on my brain. It's not necessarily the most fair system, but I think when you add all the context in, it's hard to ignore that, you know, once you get above a certain needs level, how much should you have, right? That's really the question we're getting at. So go ahead.
To be fair, it quite literally is a fair system, but that doesn't necessarily mean it's a good system.
Well, it's not fair to dollars you make later on compared to dollars you make early.
Well, it's fair to everyone in the sense that they're paying the same tax rate.
If they make that money, right?
I'm not saying that makes it a good system. Technically, it is a fair system. And I will say, just to throw right off the bat, I'm impressed that you went with this topic first because I'm under the impression this topic is what's going to take us the longest. But moving right past that, it's interesting because a flat tax, if we were to enact a flat tax, and it depends on the arguments that is for the flat tax. Some people say that a flat tax simplifies the tax code, right? Our tax code is ridiculously complex. a flat tax just sort of erases a lot of the baggage there. And it's like, yeah, maybe, but it depends on how now you want to talk about Social Security and Medicare and things like that. But I think the primary thing to consider here, as opposed to the current tax system that we have right now, whether or not it is right or wrong, a flat tax would place more of the burden per capita, or per dollar, I should say, on the middle class, period.
And that's the second question that I asked you guys. What effect might a different system have on society?
Right.
And I agree with that.
That's my biggest concern. It's right there.
Yeah.
Is that like,
I think...
Go ahead.
Yeah, the issue that I see with the entire system itself is the fact that, at first I supported a flat tax, and a flat tax would be easy, right? Just everybody gets taxed at whatever rate, 35%, 15%, whatever it is. And regardless of that, I think what's interesting to me about our current tax code is the fact that I think there was 2 studies that I saw. One had 46 different tax preparers and one had 49, and quite literally every single way that they prepared the taxes for the end of the year was different than every other. And the problem with that I see specifically is that there's too many loopholes and there's too many factors to consider when doing your taxes. So initially, although I supported like a flat tax, I get the need for having certain tax laws and certain tax regulations in order to help things like Social Security, in order to make sure that things like payroll tax is done. And I totally get all those things. I just think there needs to be a better way to simplify the tax code. And conversely, the second thing about that is that with a flat tax on a federal level, like that would only be for federal, right? You still have to consider the fact that you have to apply for state tax and do stuff for state tax as well.
Yeah.
So
local tax.
The article that I posted
local,
addressed that. Yeah, no, if anybody was able to get through that, the article I posted addressed that. Yeah, I mean, at face value, flat tax is in a way definitely fair. And even this old token lefty of this show, as I read through this pros and cons article, even the flat tax that was offered up by conservatives in the last decade or two, they all addressed the fact that, hey, nobody should get taxed below a certain level. And they did. And that's fair. I just think I was actually, I don't want to say I was surprised, because I definitely wasn't surprised. Like there are plenty of pros, and there's good arguments to be had for a flat tax. There are. And as I read through this, it's not that I was surprised. I was pleasantly pleased with even the most conservative flat tax. Like there was like a Steve Forbes. I guess he ran for president or did something, and like ran on a flat tax platform. He even had like, hey, look, below the poverty line or whatever, below some level, we're not taxing people. It's just over that, everything is taxed.
It wasn't even the poverty line. It was higher than the poverty line. Yeah.
Give credit where it's due. You're absolutely right. It was higher than the poverty line, and that's the right thing to do. And I was on board with. I think everybody's on board with that. It seems like that makes sense, right? Like we don't want to punish those disadvantaged if we're telling them, hey, just work hard, you'll make it. Like they shouldn't have to necessarily, because they haven't yet. So I think everybody agrees on that. It's just where I diverge is, especially when if you want to offer a flat tax policy, you know how I'm always policy. You've got to come with a reduction in spending, and that's got to come with a reduction in spending that the American people approve of. Otherwise, that's always DOA, dead on arrival, for anything political.
So to be fair, now you're changing your question a little bit.
I am, and I.
Okay, all right.
I'm acknowledging
that. Okay.
I'm saying that I was pleasantly surprised that some of the conservatives that I had read who had offered a flat tax acknowledged that we don't need to be taxing those that are most disadvantaged to a certain point, and it is above the poverty line. You are right, but I still, when I read stuff like this, I still want to see what they would cut, why they would cut it, because I do get tired of, and it's not all people who, I don't like labels, but it's not all people who are like kind of on the quote unquote right. I do get tired of people saying that, oh, we cut business taxes, will make more revenue. Can we just all agree that's not the case? Like the Trump administration was trying to say that last year when they had their tax cuts. That is not the case. If you cut revenue, the revenue will go down. It's not always not the case, but come on, they sold us a bag of lies because now our deficit's going up. That's all I'm trying to say.
Sure.
In this case, let me finish. In this case, as I went through this article, because maybe I'm overly critical because I'm a nut job, and that's fair. But communist.
Jeez.
Hey, we got him. I'm the one bro that. Anyways. Just in this case, I this is maybe overly critical. I want to see what you're cutting, because the revenue is going to drop. I can't have a conversation with anybody who tries to tell me that it's not. It's going to, and when it does, you need to tell me what you're cutting, how you're doing it, because if you want to cut jobs that are in the federal government and all this other stuff that's not like support, then I'm on board with that. The government doesn't need to be as big. But if we start talking about cutting Social Security and these programs that do, you know, I don't know, it's tough.
And
so
this,
I need the whole proposal. Go ahead.
Well, it comes back to the question of fair, right? Because if we were to take the current way we collect tax right now, when we were to just change it to a flat tax, there is a huge amount of money we would lose out on unless you made that flat tax higher. So now you're placing, objectively speaking, you're placing more of a tax burden on primarily like upper lower class and middle to upper lower class American citizens, right? So it's by just objectively, a progressive tax works in the sense that those who make more money do pay more money into the system, right? So if we're going to say a flat tax, though, does that not just like equalize the amount of money that we're all paying, except for those below the poverty line?
But wouldn't that be more palatable to everybody as opposed to having what we have now, which is, I mean, for Christ's sake, nobody has any idea what anybody else pays. And quite frankly, the other thing that I want to add on top of that, though, as well, and not a lot of people think about, is that if we move to a flat tax, things like property taxes, things like when you pay taxes on your car, when you go to the, you know, the DMV, for example, like there's taxes on top of those licensing fees, right? It helps streamline more than just how much you pay, right? It does impact everybody's everyday life.
That implies,
and if in my opinion, right, if you did a flat tax to the extreme, right, you got rid of every single government payment that you would have to make, which essentially is a tax. Wouldn't that make a lot of people's lives easier to go register their vehicle at the DMV, to go and get marriage license, for example, to go and get all these different things that you can do and get through the government services? I mean, that being said, your tax rate's probably going to be closer to 45, 50% potentially, but if you consider those factors, does it make it better for society?
Well, initially I'm going to say no, because if you don't have a driver's license, you get in trouble, and if you're not married, you don't get benefits. So in that sense, that works in New York State. But that's what I was going to say is that I was going to argue, well, what do you say about state and local taxes then? And immediately you address that, like, let's do flat tax across the board.
Well, that would be the assumption in the scenario I just laid out, yes.
Sure, okay. But that doesn't, again, like, in a country where we are stratified in terms of wealth, as we are, we're divided, hardline, and the fair share, well, I shouldn't say the fair share of wealth, but the share of wealth is unequally balanced towards the top. You have to admit that if we were going to go to a flat tax, it's going to hurt those who make less more. Just objectively speaking, per dollar, 100% it will.
I think the advantage, though, Chad, I'm sorry, Cyril. I think the advantage here is, in what I'm trying to point out here, is that all the things that you have to pay for, whether it's licensing, regulations for taxes, et cetera, if these things are all taken care of, how much resources are then left over by the fact that we don't have to do that anymore? I'll just take a random one, for example, like a hunting license, for example, right? I have to pay X amount of dollars in order to get a hunting license. If I didn't have to do that and all I had to do was submit an application, right? How much less time is spent having to file or do all of these other things? And my question is does that benefit us in the long run?
Chad, if I may,
sure,
kind of building off Chad's point, I worry about, and it's not necessarily true. I'm just positing this, and I'll see what Caleb thinks. I worry about, like Chad said, then people not necessarily poor, because Chad, we talked about, let's be honest, like they're even conservative proposals recognize that we shouldn't be. Yeah, exactly.
I understand that.
So there might be a middle class that takes more on a burden. I agree with Chad on that. And
there will be
kind of where I agree with maybe Chad, but not the way you think. I'd rather, I think, and Caleb, I want to hear what you think of this. I'd rather you have to pay that hunting tax, because it's your consumption tax. Like, if I'm not hunting, is my tax dollars going towards hunting? Why? Because I don't hunt. If you hunt and you want to consume that thing and there's a tax to be paid to make that happen, then I don't really have an issue with that. Do you?
I mean, I guess for me, right, if we're looking at a bigger picture, let's talk about sales tax. Let's talk about income tax.
Yeah.
Let's talk about payroll tax. Let's talk about all the taxes.
I'm open to consumption tax.
Right. And to be fair, that's fair. You're open to consumption tax. But I guess for me, the burden for that is on everybody, regardless of whether you like it or not.
It is, but a consumption tax means that the rich will still pay more in a progressive way because they consume more, because they can. They just spend more money. If spending money is consumption, which it's not necessarily.
Yeah, but isn't that what a sales tax essentially is?
It is. Yeah.
So what's the difference between moving to a consumption tax as opposed to just keeping sales tax?
Well, that's what I'm saying. If you're already paying hunting taxes specifically for the infrastructure and to support the fact that you can hunt, then that's consumption tax, right? I don't pay that because I don't hunt just yet. But I don't hunt for now.
Sure.
That's what I'm saying.
But
so I don't necessarily.
Most things that are taxed are for the benefit of the entire society. Is that a fair statement?
Are for the benefit of those who use those specific services.
That's not true, Chad. The next time you hit a deer, the next time you hit a deer, you're as a hunter, right? And I'm going to go a little waywards a little bit, Chad. To be fair, and Cyril.
Go ahead.
But as a hunter, part of the goal is the management of a given species. Now, what is important about that species is that we're trying to make sure that they don't destroy parts of our current environment, which, by the way, we don't have a ton left of. And number two, we're trying to make sure that other accidents, heaven forbid, don't happen. For example, here in New York State, you've got Route 65, one of the most dangerous places to drive at night. Why? Because there's a ton of deer.
A deer,
okay, yeah. No,
yeah.
I mean, I don't think it's a great argument. Only because, we're taking advantage of a culture that exists. We're not.
That's fair.
The people who are buying the permits are not saying, "I'm going to save somebody's car." They're saying, "I want to hunt a deer and I want to get some meat." So
and there's a mutual positive.
Correct. But to me, Chad, hold on.
Of a culture that already exists.
Well, hold on, Chad. Isn't that what most taxes do? Like, if you point out any tax, I'm sure I can show a full circle.
We all use the roads. We all try and use
the roads.
We all should be using the healthcare
pull up some other licensing thing. Let's use licensing, because to me, right, in a lot of ways, licensing is like taxes, because I got to pay for the license. Correct?
I feel like most of the taxes we pay are shared beneficial to a majority of the population.
Okay, give me another example. Let's get away from the hunting example. Is there any other example of a tax that you pay? Okay, public education.
A majority of the population. You can't argue that. It is.
I'm not arguing that. I'm saying give me an example in which I can't show you that full circle everyone benefits from this particular tax being paid. Or
that's not necessarily what I'm saying. And I suppose this isn't necessarily the main crux of this argument, but
it's not. But I'm
for the most part, the people who are paying the taxes are benefiting. Generally, a majority are benefiting from the taxes that are paid.
Yeah, and there's a lot of reasons to have taxes. There's even if things are, and we talked about this last time. If smoking's not good for people's health and it makes us pay more for it unnecessarily, then taxing it might discourage. So
sure.
There's a lot of reasons.
Or just cover the costs of your decision making. I
disagree with Caleb's statement that there's a full circle. There's always going to be consequences.
Well, of course.
To do right.
But taxes are always for the general good. If taxes weren't for the general good, then people would be a lot more upset than they are. Like we all benefit from public roads. We all benefit from public education. We all benefit from.
Yeah, but those are all local taxes. There's always an argument to be made that
we all benefit from the military. We all benefit from
agreed. Absolutely. Oh, absolutely. Absolutely.
But for me, I guess
reserve system, even though it may have its flaws.
Go ahead, Gil.
For me, for the most part, I feel like when it comes to a flat tax, the agreement we have between the three of us is the fact that not necessarily that we want to go to a flat tax, but we want to simplify the tax code so it makes sense to the land.
Correct.
Yes?
Yeah, of course.
Absolutely.
To me, what I would like to take one step farther is that if we incorporated all of the licensing fees that people have to pay for all sorts of different government things, if that were included, Chad, not to say that you couldn't just go and get whatever you wanted just because, like, you'd still have to apply for it. But if we tax at a flatter rate, how how many more resources would be freed up in order to accomplish other goals?
But see, I disagree. I feel like more resources would be tied up if you were to try and universalize things like that. Like local municipalities exist for a reason. States exist for a reason.
Do you feel that way because then a central power can dictate all the money? Because I agree with that. I don't.
Well,
because I could just be like, then let's pick a random person. Then, some weird lefty weirdo could win and be like, you know what? Because we collect all the money, we're not going to let anybody hunt anymore. You know what I'm saying? And that could be an abuse of like, oh well,
that's not necessarily what I'm saying. I'm saying I disagree with what Caleb's saying. Similarly to how I disagree with Common Core. States exist individually. Localities exist individually,
you can lean on them.
At an individual sense.
For sure.
And to try and
but would it be layered?
that to a flat tax would be...
Well,
it would just be kind of unreasonable. It wouldn't mesh with the necessities of each individual.
Chad just made a great argument for turning a lot of decision making over to states. I don't disagree with that.
I don't disagree with that either. And I guess the idea for me in this quote unquote flat tax scenario is the fact that it's a layered flat tax. The federal government gets 15%. This local state gets 15%. The local government gets 5%.
Right, because you're combining.
It wouldn't be just like I can. Right, I can just flat tax whatever the fuck I want, or pardon my French, but whatever the hell I want. That's not where I'm trying to go with that. But the idea would be, and to me, to Cyril's point, right, he wants to see a budget. If we had to keep a flat tax at X amount of percent across the board, the federal government would have to be within that budget, right? You can't just manipulate numbers in such a way where people can get away with it. For example, Chad, the IRS says this year we're going to get $15 billion or $8 trillion in taxes, right? How often is the IRS correct in that actual number for the year-end taxes? They're not. There's no way that you could be correct. When 49 different people can file their taxes based on the same numbers and get 49 different results, it's impossible for the IRS to say you're going to get this much money.
I'm not going to argue with you at all about how complicated and egregious our tax code is. I will not disagree with you at all. 0%. Okay. It is ridiculous.
No sane person can.
All I was saying is if you were trying to nationalize down to the state or even the local level, you're going to leave people behind. That's all I'm saying.
I think a lot of
people
if you're saying
one last thing,
if I could just
do you guys agree or hang on?
Okay, sorry, Chad.
Go ahead, Chad.
A flat tax makes sense somewhat on a federal level, but it falls apart. It dissolves completely on a state and local level. That's all I'm saying.
Mm-hmm. Well, because I mean,
it's just it's not comparable.
The federal tax is the number one for most U.S. residents, anyways. So it's not like obviously that's why tax gets complicated because there's like the property tax at the local level.
Sure, let's simplify the federal tax.
I mean, New York State has an income tax,
local is complicated because it has to be, because there are subcultures that exist, because there are different groups of people that exist.
But each state and local municipality would be able to say, hey, if you live here, I'm only going to charge you 5%, whereas you live over there, you're going to get charged 15%.
Not at a flat tax.
That would still exist. Yes, it would if it was layered the way that I proposed. If federal was at 15%,
then we're talking about different things.
Well, I guess that's where I was going with it.
I thought you were arguing a flat tax at all levels.
No.
Layers. I was on board with. Well, not on board, but like I knew
layers is a different thing.
Yeah, Caleb is literally,
and that's what I was literally arguing for.
One tax, like one
federally,
right? Well,
right.
Yeah.
Well, federal would have, again, I'm just throwing numbers. If it was 15, 15, and 5.
Yeah, but look.
Right? 15% goes to federal, 15% goes to your state, and 5% goes to your local government.
Yeah, I'm tapping
out. Honestly, you could still make it simpler. If
you just that's fair.
Every single, like at the federal level, you did a flat for everything. At a state, you did a flat for everything. So if you had a flat at every level, it's still simpler than what we have now.
Oh,
and by the way, agree or disagree?
You're saying it varies per state.
Yes.
Then I'm with you. I'm 100%.
That's specifically what I'm going towards.
Last thing before we break.
Well, I'm with you kind of, but I still think a progressive tax is needed. Is all I'm saying.
One more thing though, Chad. One more thing. The presumption.
I'm not on the flat tax board.
Well, what you were saying earlier, Chad, specifically was it's going to leave people behind. My question then would be to you, and this is the way that I try to think of it: would it leave less people behind than in which we leave now?
A flat tax.
If we cut services that needy people truly use to get ahead, then sure.
But that would be my proposition. My challenge to Chad would be that
a complete flat tax would. Yes,
I agree with you there.
Well, it only would if you cut
even federally, even just federally, it would. It would. Yeah. There are parts of this country that do way better than other parts of this country, and if you want to leave the rural parts of this country behind, then that's your prerogative. But
you go on Breitbart, they're talking about how California is going to sink into the ocean because they're so goddamn liberal.
Well, it's not even that. It's California, it's New York, and it's Texas.
Listen, and on the other side
they benefit best from a flat tax, and it's South Dakota.
On the other side of the coin, if you go on salon.com, they're going to talk about how Alabama's falling apart. Now, it may not be great, and it may not agree with my ideology, but they're not falling apart. We still live in a very privileged country. But last thing I want to say, and I want to hear what you guys both say from this. A lot of, especially on a personal level, not necessarily on a business level. I don't know on a business level. Actually, business is probably more complicated. But on a personal level, taxes are so complicated because of deductions, more or less, really. Like deductions is where, like I remember I used to watch, there was a couple years where I saw Dad do taxes on his personal business or, that. And as far as just like, it's the deductions that are complicated. The going through and painstakingly proving that you did this so you can get that deduction. And that's what's so complicated. So if we can get rid of deductions and just have like flat, not even just tax, but just like have like, simpler, this is just what your tax. There's no deduction. This is just what your tax.
Wait. Oh. Yeah. If you do your taxes correctly, I think my phone just messed up.
You're fine. You come back when you can. Go ahead.
If you do your deductions correctly, if you do your entire process correctly, because remember, when you go and sign up for your job, you have to mark how many deductions you have for the year, right? People forget that they have to do that. I typically mark 0 because then I factor in all my shit at the end of the year. But if you did your stuff right, you would be able to understand your deductions from the get-go so that when you do your taxes, you owe them $0 and they owe you $0. The problem with the taxes right now is that most people hit 0 so they can get a check at the end of the year and they depend on that check. Right. Because a lot of people don't have the ability or don't understand the concept of fiscal responsibility and saving throughout the year, so they depend on that check at the end of the year, which is tough.
Yeah. Some people don't have fiscal responsibility. A lot of people struggle. But okay.
Oh, I'm sorry. I just want to point out the fact that 49% of our country lives paycheck to paycheck. But okay.
Yeah, but
I also want to point out the fact that our society runs.
Yeah, come on. Are you going to choose to blame all 49% of those people for putting themselves?
Not at all. Okay. But how much of that 49% doesn't have to live paycheck to paycheck?
It's interesting.
Better choices are definitely a thing.
We've done this before, and we've done this time and time again, and we always kind of split it down to this core like theme of personal responsibility.
Yeah.
And personal freedom. And we've always split it down to just like responsibility and irresponsibility.
I would say responsibility versus opportunity. Because if you had the opportunity but you weren't responsible, then I don't know what to say to you. Okay. But if you never had the opportunity but you were responsible,
you could split it down to opportunity or non-opportunity. But
then obviously you can debate that. But yeah, generally,
there's a spectrum within that, is what I'm saying. Like, Caleb, there's plenty of people who literally have to live paycheck to paycheck. There's plenty of people who don't necessarily have to live
but make
paycheck
poor choices,
to paycheck.
Of course.
And this is America, and you're free to make those decisions. And
that's the tough thing, right? We want to sit here and maybe blame them, but they are allowed to make those decisions. Not that we can live in a society that you're not going to live in a society that tells them they can't, though. Yeah, it's tough.
Well, I'll say is at the end of this, I 100% in the spirit of flat tax, I absolutely support a very simple tax code. But I'm still on board with the progressive.
As with anything else,
there you
go. We all fall in different positions ideologically, and I bet you on taxes we could all sit at the table and figure out something we could all agree on and say like, hey, this is something like, negotiate like real people instead of our leaders now. Okay, let's move on to
there you go.
The second one. I don't think this will be too long. Chad made a prediction. I agree with him.
Who, Roger Stone?
Yeah, just the Roger Stone thing.
Roger Stone.
Yeah. The question I had for everybody, let me just posit the question out loud. Does the Roger Stone indictment change your mind at all about Trump campaign 2016?
Absolutely.
And then I said about the administration now as well. The second part, I don't even like that question. The administration now is just, it doesn't really affect my thought process.
I'll let Caleb lead it.
Oh, yeah, go ahead.
That
sounded interesting.
I am shocked. Shocked.
Okay, sarcasm. All right, now I have to leave.
Now it's all falling apart.
There was a little bit of, we thought it was like, oh my goodness. No, okay.
Right.
Right. I'm kind of on board with Caleb, but all right. So I wrote a couple things. No, yeah, I said no. We already knew this campaign was scummy. Campaign, not Trump. If anybody ever listens to this, I mean that. Campaign, not Trump. There's a big difference there.
There is. There absolutely is.
Second thing I wrote, I don't even know why. I was just reading the article and I wrote things. Trump loves Trump because he always does. I don't even know why I wrote that. It was probably something
that's not a point.
That just made me say that. But then I was talking to Chad a little bit about it earlier, just kind of BSing before we started.
Mm-hmm.
One thing of importance in the indictment, if you read it, or even if you see people talk about it, and I read it and I confirmed it's in there. In the indictment, it states that a high campaign official dictated Stone.
Cheers, Chad.
To get more info from WikiLeaks.
Okay.
So there was in this indictment. It doesn't say who it was. It just says high campaign administration official dictated to Stone. To get more info from WikiLeaks. And from the article, the charges focus on Stone's alleged ties to House Intelligence Committee during 2017 about his statements about and efforts to get in touch with WikiLeaks during 2016 campaign. The indictment also conspicuously mentions that a senior Trump campaign official was directed to contact Stone about what WikiLeaks might have on Hillary Clinton. So for full context, this was after there were already dumps. And I don't know how, but this indictment makes it seem like the Trump, not even, I don't know how, it was public. The first dumps were public and they don't seem, based on this indictment, to be directed. But then after a couple dumps happened, it seems that the Trump campaign was fully aware that Roger Stone was working with WikiLeaks and was like, hey, WikiLeaks dumped this. Let's reach out to him and see if there's anything else. So to be fair, it wasn't, and every time we hear collusion in the media, I feel like me and everybody thinks that they're like Trump picking up the phone and being like, Putin, let's work together. It's not it. All right. Right. Like there's all kinds of things at play here that are like channels.
But that's so important.
What?
That's very important. That distinction is very important.
Of course it is.
Which is what we were talking about earlier.
Of course it is.
It was Roger Stone.
Trump didn't pick up the phone and call Putin. That's crazy. We don't know, but I don't think that's the case. All right.
You think Roger Stone is picking up the phone and calling Putin?
I think Roger Stone is picking up the phone and calling Julian Assange based on this indictment. Yeah.
Yeah, but in what?
I think Julian Assange worked with the Russian government. Yeah. Yes,
but that's where it kind of becomes like difficult. And this is my favorite part.
But it doesn't make it not scummy. Go ahead.
100%. 100% I agree with you.
Maybe not legal problems, but come on,
But this is my favorite part.
Let you go.
Okay, sure.
The last thing I wrote on this was here's the thing. Stone was not convicted of anything that he did in 2016 with the campaign, with WikiLeaks, nothing like that. Stone was convicted for trying to tamper with the investigation.
Correct.
All counts.
Yeah.
So why did he lie so much?
Well, this is
why
my
did he
thing.
go in front of Congress and lie? Because he could have gone in front of Congress and said, this is what I did, and it wouldn't have been criminal at all. So what is he covering up, yo?
This is exactly... Well, this is what I'm talking about. And even if all the truth came out about Roger Stone, I don't think it's going to reveal Roger Stone as somebody who is moving the chess pieces in the Russian hierarchy to make the DNC hacks happen and the release happen. He's just in the back channels with these sort of things. And this is what we were talking about earlier, right? Like we're talking about collusion and to a greater realistic extent conspiracy, which is against our Constitution. You cannot conspire with other foreign governments against our government. But it's like, it's these weird, and we've seen this with a lot of people so far that have been charged in Mueller's investigation. It doesn't have to come down to collusion with Russia. It's people lying to the FBI. It's people lying to Congress. It's people intimidating witnesses because they think they have done something wrong. And they have.
That could be the simple explanation. And usually the simplest one is the answer. They could be just afraid of.
I think they were in very close contact with the Kremlin and with people working for the Kremlin. I don't think they instructed anybody to do anything, but I think they were like feeding into Russia's active trying to destabilize our democracy.
Why?
But it, like,
why in this day and age, in this society, if you have enough money, you can hire a good lawyer. Why didn't you hire a good enough lawyer to go back through everything you did and tell you you're going to be fine? Tell the truth. Now,
because they're dumb.
Hang on. Okay, but I was about to say that is the simplest answer. And how many times have I said, especially on this cast, if you go back and listen, the simplest answer is usually the answer.
Right.
So in that case, I don't ring alarm bells even still about this whole Russia thing. I don't. But it's just weird, yo. Why do you keep lying?
It is, and they should be in trouble for doing what they're doing.
I honestly think that Roger Stone...
Don't let it distract you from the fact that I think they should be in trouble for doing what they're doing.
No, of course. We all agree with that. But
go on.
I honestly think that Roger Stone lies because he doesn't want any digging into his whole history. I don't know if anybody is really worried about especially when it comes to Trump and Stone. But Trump and Stone better damn be worried about the 80s, 90s, and the 2000s probably. Come on, yo. Of course they should be. I can guarantee you they should be. Roger Stone, watch that Netflix documentary. Roger Stone has always been shady. And if you walk away from the documentary going, oh, he didn't break no rules. Okay, all right. I can sell you a car, okay? So,
Caleb, do you have any knee-jerk reactions here?
Caleb stays unplugged from the news. Good for him.
I try to.
We throw those links out, so.
It does. Well, that's where I get most of my curated news from. I think... I think what's just as plausible, though, is the fact that they don't understand the law. Therefore, they think they broke the law, and that's why they lied.
I agree.
To Chad's point, right? Like, Chad, you said specifically, if he didn't lie from the beginning,
he'd be fine.
Would he have been indicted?
He wouldn't have been.
Maybe.
Well,
okay.
Maybe, but definitely not as indicted.
But hold on.
As indicted as you're going to be for lying to the FBI in Congress.
Nobody's a lawyer here. I agree with Caleb. Like, no. From what I've read and seen, no. I
just don't think, and if that's even if that's close enough to being true, I think it's because they don't have the full understanding of what the law actually says. And to I don't know who said it, Cyril or Chad. To one of your guys' point, if you would have just hired a lawyer who understood the law,
that's what I'm saying,
you would have been fine. But they didn't because they think they're above it, and B, they have no idea how it works.
You could be cheap, and B, another argument for. Well, hang on really quickly, Caleb. Another argument for what you were just saying is maybe you think the president will pardon you. Who knows? Go ahead.
That's a possibility. But I think the other thing, too, is that if I hired a lawyer, most likely what is the lawyer going to tell you? Plead the fifth.
Right.
Does pleading the fifth... Hold on. Does pleading the fifth benefit Roger Stone at all? No.
And I mean, he didn't.
Tweeting that you have forward knowledge about certain leaks coming from Julian Assange.
Again, I'm not disagreeing with you. I'm not disagreeing with you. But hold on.
And then to lie to the FBI.
But hold on. But
stupid.
But let's talk about how does Roger Stone make money? How does he have a living? He has a living a lot because he's in the press. Because he's a public figure. Right.
He's in the pot.
But by being a public figure, right? But if I make a living or base my ideas off of being a public figure, pleading the fifth doesn't help me at all. So for me, I feel like I land on the side of they did shady things that weren't necessarily illegal, maybe unethical, but then fucked it all up by lying about it. That's where I land right now.
Agreed. That's that's what kills me.
Yep.
That's what absolutely kills me about all of this shit.
The number one threat to Trump is his past business deals, because everyone knows he's kind of scummy.
Yeah.
But that's not even Trump. That's not what they're investigating. That's not what they're investigating.
That it is obstruction of justice because you're dumb.
I know.
You're dumb. And then the number 3 thing may be Russia. Maybe. But we all kind of agree here that, like, it's probably garbage. It's probably a nothing burger.
Well, we've talked about this before, right?
Like, oh, well. And then what did I say to you, Chad, earlier today before when we also talked a little bit? I was like, guess how Trump's presidency ends. It's not an impeachment. It's just he just loses in 2020. That's what happens. The Mueller report will be not a good report for him at all. It'll be awful. A lot of independence by 2020. I don't know, man. They're going to be like, and I'm not saying Trump's going to lose. I'm not. Who the Democrats pick still is a major thing. Everybody knows. But look, right now it's not good. You just shut the government down and lost this economy $6 billion, which is even more than you wanted for the wall for nothing. for nothing. There's economic reports that
Right.
said you lost more by shutting the government down than you even want for the wall, and you got nothing out of it. So there's all these things that are happening, and his approval rate finally ticked down on that. So once the Mueller report drops, I said this to Chad earlier, Caleb can say something if he wants after. Once the Mueller report drops, the way this ends is Trump just loses in 2020 and goes into the night. Some people do get indicted that were around him, but Trump's never gonna. He was president, and it just is what it is, and that's it. Case closed. So unless the Democrats pick like some crazy, go ahead.
Trump's mainly concerned with his legacy right now, and he knows that his core fan base wants a wall, so he has to build that wall. That's period.
Yeah.
Right. Like, and I won't be surprised if the Republicans, after Mueller's report comes out, start putting up opponents to his re-election in 2020. I would not be surprised. Besides that, though, right? it blows my mind that there is a full, able chance that the Trump team and the Trump campaign necessarily did nothing wrong, and the only reason they're all getting in trouble is because they lied to the FBI and they lied to Congress because they were scared that they did do something wrong.
They didn't win. They wouldn't know.
That's what blows my mind. They and to a greater extent, and I've mentioned this before with Stormy Daniels, with I can't remember who the other female's name is, but they were like illicit periods in Trump's past where they were willing to talk about it, and it was like, even if these things came out, your supporters would not have given a shit. You would still have won the presidency. 100%, I believe that.
Do you think any of his supporters care that he was negotiating a Trump Tower in Moscow up until the election?
No, you would have won. You would have won. It doesn't matter. That's what kills me. Even if there was no collusion at all of these people have been doing for the past few years is shooting themselves in the foot, the thighs, and the chest, and now they're getting caught up in it. Because
go ahead.
Seriously, these people, Cohen's spending time in prison, Manafort's spending time in prison. There are other people that are spending time in prison, not because of direct collusion, but because they just lied and they deceived.
Well,
and they
Manafort
were
actually had a history before Trump, but
okay, fair enough.
Well, but you're right. A lot of them will be just there.
It's crazy. You could have just won the election.
I'm gonna let
you could have just won the election. It's unbelievable to me.
They could have lost too, and nothing would have happened. All right.
Oh.
So I read. We'll move on to the third thing here. We'll let you. All right, Chad, take a breath.
I just can't.
I just gotta
just won.
Go in the corner and jerk one off real quick. You gotta get the synergy out of it.
Okay. Yeah, I'll be back in a minute, gentlemen.
All right, we'll see him back here. Okay, Article 3, or just Topic 3. Basically,
Chad legit walked away.
Yeah, he did. That's fine. That's what he needs to do. So basically, literally about how we feel about stem cell research. I read an article this week that was uplifting, right? It was a nice one. It was a positive one about how some guys using stem cell research to correct paralysis that he's had for a long time, and it's really positive and it's going in the right direction. And then you were nice enough to post basically like a for and against kind of article for stem cell that really updates everybody on the information that's available for stem cells. Because, and I'm going to start with this. After I read the article that you posted, Caleb, I don't know why anybody cares about the debate anymore. I really don't. We're getting to a point where we can efficiently just create stem cells, even from just like any cells at all. There's just really no reason to have this debate anymore.
Well, a lot of people talk about the holy grail of the stem cell, which unfortunately, well, I shouldn't say unfortunately, but it's from an embryo, right? That's the holy grail of stem cells.
So we're not there yet. Better than it. Right.
We're not.
Right.
But we're pretty close. Relatively speaking, we're right there.
That's what
what I found interesting specifically was in that article, it talks about stem cell research thus raised difficult questions. Number 1, does life begin at fertilization in the womb or at birth? Number 2, is a human embryo equivalent to a human child? Number 3, does a human embryo have any rights? Number 4, might the destruction of a single embryo be justified if it provides a cure for countless number of patients? And number 5, since ES cells can grow indefinitely in a dish and can, in theory, still grow into a human being, is the embryo really destroyed? And I think the point of me bringing that up is the fact that still the argument that we're having is tied to abortion, it's tied to religion, it's tied to specific rights and when those rights kick into place. And that's, I think, what most people talk about right now. Now, in the long term, to your point, Cyril, we're going to be able to grow them, and it's not going to matter. But
yes, exactly. So and
it's still we still have these questions.
I appreciate you because that context mattered, and I didn't say that. And you're right. I hope nobody cares about this debate anymore, in the sense that if we're funding research solely to get to that point where we don't have to have that debate, then there should be no debate. Do you understand what I'm saying? Like if you're just funding research in the one direction. But look, also, and this is where, especially here in this country, we can get, I'm about to get just a little political about it. And if you want to drive it back over, you're fine.
No, you can go political.
Especially in this country, when you read that article you posted, Caleb, there are laws in this country. You can't do a lot of these the most egregious things that people say and fearmonger about as far as getting stem cells. There are literal laws in this country preventing people from doing that. And so even when we talk about the fact that we might get to a place someday where we don't have to do the controversial way of getting stem cells, there are still ways where like people have miscarriages, people do this, people do that, and they can be collected. It says so in the article. Right. And those are the ways that they get collected here. Now, does that limit you? It does. But as far as America goes, nobody should be. This is like the Planned Parenthood freaking thing. Everyone's like, there's a lot of people that are like, shut down Planned Parenthood. And I'm like, yo, Planned Parenthood is like 2% abortions, 98% women's reproductive health.
Although I agree with you, we're not talking about stem cells. We're not talking about abortion. We're talking about, according to those people, the morality of our country and our civilization. And that's where they feel like they have that just cause to say the things they say. That's the question. Do you feel like
if you want,
go ahead,
the problem is entering the realm of morality.
Correct.
Right.
And
that's where the problem comes from. Because like objectively speaking, we are a country separated from any sort of religion, period. Right?
We're supposed to be. Yeah.
And secondary, and it shouldn't be secondary, but secondary, if you want to talk morality, it's like, okay, you have, and specifically with a lot of the embryonic cells, aka stem cells that are accumulated today, are from, what's the word when you have sort of like an egg and a sperm cell joined outside of the womb and then planted inside of you? Right? I'm completely...
Surrogacy?
Is it in vitro?
In vitro fertilization.
There it is, yes.
There are plenty of eggs that get fertilized in a laboratory type environment, not in a natural type sense of way. And specifically, so the article you linked was this guy, right? And it was like an in vitro egg that was fertilized in like 1998, right? Like a ridiculously long time ago that has just been like, because of laboratory conditions, have just been expanding and creating these stem cells since then, right?
Wait.
So it's in terms of strict morality, this is where I'm getting at. You're talking about a guy who has recovered upper body limb strength because of a fertilized egg that like just was a group of fertilized eggs, right? And one of those was taken out and put in vitro fertilization into a lady. And the rest of them were just like, okay, well, we got the child that we wanted. We don't necessarily need the rest of these. And that is what led to this incredible development, this guy gaining his upper body limb strength, right? Like, if you want to talk strict morality, it's kind of just like, okay, well, what is morality then by definition? Because we've given this guy his strength and body back. We didn't necessarily cheat a life out of being alive. We just threw a bunch at a group of eggs, and we just took what was viable, and what was left behind was like, okay, well, let's do some scientific research with this. Morality kind of gets gray in this area if you want to talk about morality. That's where I kind of disagree with that.
Yeah, but if that stops us as a culture from doing it, then we have to talk about it. And
because of a certain group of people.
Correct.
Absolutely. I mean, that's the conversation. That group of people is part of our society. You can't just ignore them.
I agree. No, I agree.
So the question is, right, the ultimate question here with abortion, with stem cells, is when, at what point does a child have rights like a normal human?
Sure.
That's what, I mean, that's what's based. That's why late-term abortion is illegal in certain states, right? That's why in other states it doesn't matter, you know?
No, I agree.
Well, that's the question. That's the question at this point, is that I'm posing to you guys, at what point does a child begin to have rights?
When it can survive outside the womb on its own.
So here's my question then. If I may, with that statement, because that's a pretty aggressive one, based on Cyril's
think it is.
face. I think it is. So let me ask you a question. Hold on.
Okay.
If a woman who is currently 9 months pregnant has yet to give birth to this child starts shooting heroin, should that lady be charged with child endangerment?
Yes.
But you're saying that child has no rights until it leaves the womb, correct?
No. When it can survive outside of the womb, and that's at about 6 to 7 months.
Okay. All right. So I misconstrued
It's actually more about 5.5 to 7 months.
You're good.
Really?
Okay,
so you're going to
viability outside of the womb.
Definitely thought you were going in a different direction. But either way, that's fair. So let me pose that same question. Hold on.
Oh, sorry.
Let me pose that same question.
Our
2 months.
sister was born 5 months outside.
All
of
right,
the
let
womb.
him go.
I get you.
No, I'm just saying that's a direct example of viability.
Go ahead.
100%. My question though is what if a woman does heroin at 2 months pregnant?
Yeah, she should probably abort that child.
Well, that's not what I asked. Is she committing a crime against something that has no rights?
Oh yeah, 100%.
So we talk about intention on this pod a lot. It's intention.
Correct.
If she intends to have that baby, then correct, she is.
But what if she
You
doesn't
need to
know?
let the woman make the choice though, because it's her body.
So let me ask you this, because this is a lot of scenarios, Cyril, and you know this just as well as I do.
You could be 2 months pregnant and not know and do heroin. Go ahead.
For sure, definitely.
2 months is different than 5 months, but fair.
I'm just posing the questions because they're challenging questions.
No, they're good ones.
And Cyril has probably seen this more than anybody, maybe more than me, but let's talk about a scenario in which, not to say that you had a child out of wedlock or anything like that, but you've got a lot of friends that were in the military, right? And this happens a lot.
Oh my gosh, yes.
You get somebody pregnant, you tell them, hey, we're going to get married, everything's going to be great, she intends on keeping the kid, and then all of a sudden, 5, 6, 7 months in, he's like, nah, fuck this, I'm out.
Yeah.
Now what? Now where does that responsibility lie? Like, at what point do we talk about intent as opposed to situation?
Yep. Once you, and I feel like, and I don't ask me how you figure this out from people's brains, but I feel like once that couple intends to have that baby, if they now realize they can't make this whole thing work, then they should put that baby up for adoption, because there's plenty of people that would adopt babies. So
see,
I agree with you.
It's the intention of if you went ahead and made that decision to have it, it is now locked in. Like, that's locked in.
There's a wonderful
Caleb. I think Caleb gets to the point of, even if you don't even have intention, let's say someone doesn't even know they're pregnant, like, and then they find out they're pregnant at like 6 months. I want to say they're definitely still allowed to do whatever they want with their body, but that's pretty late in the game.
But are they? Right. That's the question.
That's where the difficulty. Yeah.
Of course, that's where the question. And there was the late and great Christopher Hitchens, who was famously pro-life, despite being a I shouldn't say far left, but just being a liberal-minded type of person he was when he was in the society that existed, in American society. And he was primarily like an atheist. He was a humanist, right? And these are the type of people who you wouldn't typically associate with somebody who is pro-life, right? So I tend to share the ideas that he shared, primarily because he was so brilliant. Not to suck his cock too much, but you're talking about these very fine gray areas, which are perfectly fine areas to talk about. But there are, outside of those gray areas, are very clear black and white areas that should be in accordance with the laws that we have. If you're 3 months pregnant and you've been using heroin the whole time, don't have that child. Sorry. If you're 3 months pregnant and you've been abusing alcohol the whole time, don't have that child. Sorry if that's upsetting to you. If you're 7 months pregnant and you just found out and you didn't know the whole way along, right? This is a very finessed type of thing. But if that exists, I'm sorry, but you've reached a point where that child is viable outside of the womb. And it's it has its rights to its life because it is viable outside of you. If there is a thing living inside of you entirely dependent on you as a living being, like 3 months, right? And you have no intention of raising or bringing up this child. You don't know who the father is. You don't know if you have an environment you can bring that inside of. You don't know if you could support yourself, let alone that child. Don't have that child. These things are very clear to me. There's a gray area, 100%. But when you start diminishing the quality of life that child can have, right, before it can survive outside of the womb, maybe that's not a child we should bring into society, because that's not something that you can bring up to be a viable human being. Sorry,
and
maybe it shouldn't be had.
We can have the moral debate all day.
It's a tough one.
Oh my gosh, it is a tough one.
100%.
But when we talk about this realistically, how many people are abusing heroin in this country? Not a majority of women. No.
Sure. And a majority of women find out they're
alcohol?
pregnant before they're 4 months pregnant.
How many
Can you admit that?
What is the percentage of adults who have a few drinks a week as opposed to just being an raging alcoholic? And like, I'm sure there's kids whose parents had a few drinks a week and they're fine. So that is a part of the. No, I'm not saying you don't, Chad. Hang on.
It's a thin margin is what I'm saying. There's a very clear line that we can draw here. If you want to talk about the thin margin, we can talk about the thin margin. But for the most part,
yeah,
obviously what we should do here.
Because there is.
I'm sorry, you know that you're pregnant for the most part if you're female in this country by 3 or 4 months. You do.
Sure.
You just do. Yeah. And you know whether or not you want to or are able to bring up that child. And if you're not able to,
that's exactly my point.
That's your right to remove it, because it's entirely dependent on your body for its sustenance and survival. That's your choice.
And that's exactly my point. These are all extreme. Like, the moral arguments are extreme ones where we have to come up with extreme examples just to have that moral argument.
Right.
Most of the time, it's not like that, man. Most people aren't alcoholics. Most people aren't druggies doing heroin.
Most people are aware of their body cycles. Most women are aware of their own cycles.
But hold on. But why do we pose these difficult questions? We pose these questions so we can find where that line is. And in the point of doing that is that it is difficult. I hear you. You're right. Yeah. I agree with you.
My point is I hate when a few ruin it for all. There's good policy to be had where a few might ruin it. But
but
I hear you.
This is where I'm at, because
overall we generally agree on stuff like this. I only pose the question in order to challenge our premise.
I know,
100%, because there is a. Well, this is how I feel about gun control, because there is 100% a gray area to talk about. No, because there is 100%.
We're not doing that on this one. No, we're not doing that on this one.
Just for a simple time. Let's all not lose our shit right here.
I think we all agree. Hold on. We agree more about abortion and embryos than we do about guns.
We're not going to get into gun control. Okay? Let's just relax.
You started
it. As a point of contention, right? There is a gray area, right?
Yeah.
But for the most part, Americans are aware of what the moral contention should be.
I get tired of the gray area control.
100%.
Don't let the gray area
Let's argue it all day, because that's an important line to find. But outside of that, it's like kind of clear, isn't it? Americans should own guns if they can prove their competence and responsibility. And if you can't,
I hate using labels, but I hate using labels, but I have a feeling that regardless of where we stand on a bunch of issues, the three of us are probably more conservative on guns and immigrants. I know we are. Okay. That's all the time we have for this week.